All right, good morning. Welcome to the 2023 Diversity in STEM Education Summit, Building a Coalition for Attracting and Retaining a Diverse Teaching Workforce. I am Sherelle Williams. I'm a program manager at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, and I am so glad that you're able to join us this morning for this information session. Next slide. So before we get started, I just want to take a quick moment to allow all of my colleagues to introduce themselves, who will be sharing with you more about this up and coming summit. So I will hand it over to Amy.
Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Amy D'Amico. I am the Division Director of Professional Services at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. The Services Division does all of the center's outward facing work, outreach, professional development, leadership development. And with that, I will turn it over to Addie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Addie Allred, and I am a program specialist with Smithsonian, and I'm really excited to get started on this project. And Alex?
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex. I'm a program assistant on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access team at Smithsonian Science Education Center, and I'm super excited to share all about our program with you guys today.
Thank you all. Appreciate that. All right, we can go ahead into the next slide. And I will allow Addie to get us started with some housekeeping before we continue on.
Hey, awesome. So we are really excited to have everyone here, and we just wanted to give you a couple of quick tips for housekeeping and making sure that that this session is as engaging as possible. So if you can, please turn on your subtitles or view the full transcript. You can select the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. And it should come up with that notification to the left of the presentation. And we also advise that you turn off your camera to reduce bandwidth. And then also make sure that you are on mute to reduce any background noise. And please, we are asking everyone to take advantage of the chat box, using that to just let us know sort of any questions or concerns that we can address. We have some staff here who can monitor the chat as well, to make sure that any questions that you have can be answered. So we are also recording this webinar, and make sure to just understand that we are recording, and it's just for the purposes of for this meeting, and it will we also have the chat box and share what you are comfortable with as well. Any other thing I should mention, Sherelle?
No, that's it. Thank you. We can go ahead and continue on. Thank you.
So if you would like to, please share in the chat where you are joining us from and what organization you are with.
And I see quite a few folks have already started to introduce themselves. Just keep it coming. We just want to know who's in the room. Thank you so much, Addie, for getting us started this morning. I'm going to go ahead and continue on to our session outline. There is a good number of things to cover this morning. We are going to start with the history and mission of the Smithsonian Science Education Center, or SSEC for short. You'll be hearing from Amy to learn about the goals and the impact of the Diversity in STEM Education Summit. We'll also be talking about the summit and pre- and post-summit activities in brief. There's a lot of information there, but we do want to make sure that you feel more acquainted with what's happening, and so we'll give you a quick overview of that, as well as explain the summit team and mentor expectations, the team and mentor applications, and then finally we'll talk about travel and accommodations that will be provided by the Smithsonian. So I will hand it over to Amy to get us started with the first section.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Sherelle. So we actually embarked, let me tell you first a little bit about the center, and then we'll talk a little bit about the history of the work itself. Next slide, please. So the Smithsonian Science Education Center was actually founded in 1985 as a collaboration between the National Academies and the Smithsonian. In about 2010, we sort of shifted our intellectual property over to the Smithsonian Institution. We still have a strong relationship with the National Academies. We are their sort of focal point for international activity, and we collaborate with them on education initiatives as well. But given that we were sort of fully under the Smithsonian umbrella, if you will, we changed our name to the Smithsonian Science Education Center, so people had a sense of who we are and what we did, because National Science Resources Center doesn't really mean a whole lot if you don't know what it is. And our mission is really transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. We sort of work with the ecosystem of stakeholders, if you will, that are involved in education: students, families, caregivers, teachers, schools, school districts, education agencies and ministries of education, nonprofit entities, organizations such as, that represent yourselves. But I think the real important piece here is that we, are really trying to do this work in collaboration with you in your local contexts. We recognize that, you understand your students better than anyone else. So it's really incumbent upon us as a center to provide sort of the infrastructure and space for you all to really kind of drive your problems of practice and help provide, support in moving through that. So the way that we do this, next slide, is that we have 3 goals for the center. One is related to promoting active inquiry-based K-12 STEM teaching and learning. Another is advancing K-12 STEM education for sustainable development. And then finally, ensuring equity, diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusion in STEM. So the work that we are going to be speaking about today is really falls squarely in our, DEAI, or diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion goal for the center. It's not to say it doesn't sort of touch on the others as well, but it is really, really very DEAI focused. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of sense of the work that we've been engaging in for several years, actually started in about 2016. We had our first summit in 2017, but we identified a sort of a problem of practice for ourselves, if you will. Next slide. So there's been a lot of conversation about the STEM workforce itself. There's a real need for individuals to have technical backgrounds to be able to fill the workforce. And while these jobs go unfilled, if you take a look at the demographics, this is, from 2015, but there hasn't been that much of a shift in the last 7 years or so. We have seen sort of a bit of a change in the trend, but the jobs are largely occupied by 50% white males. That's not to say we don't need white males in the STEM workforce. It just means we need more people to go into the STEM workforce to fill the jobs that are empty. Next slide. If you sort of take a look at the teaching workforce, we have a similar problem in that, as you all probably know, we have many unfilled positions in education, sort of across the board. And similarly to, sort of what is traditionally considered the STEM workforce, we're not we're not drawing on sort of the breadth of the US population. So the majority of educators in the US are white, and by and large, particularly in the elementary school space, they're largely female. So there's a real need to draw from larger sort of swath, for lack of a better way to describe it, of the population to encourage folks to go into education. But retention is also, so there's sort of a recruitment problem, but there's also a retention problem, where individuals from sort of historically underrepresented populations that do go into education typically don't persist in the teaching workforce, which is another problem. So if you go to the next slide. So essentially what we did, and I should also note that there's a lot of data that also indicates that this is a problem, not just for the fact that, you know, we have a lot of empty positions that we need to fill, but also the student population across our country is becoming increasingly diversified. As of 2014, the white student population enrolling in public school was no longer the majority. So what this means for students is that there are sort of detrimental impacts on student performance based on that mismatch of teachers to students. This is particularly true in African American populations, but can also be seen in Latinx populations as well. And fundamentally, all students benefit from a diversity of ideas and presentation. So essentially our work as part of, you know, sort of this summit is to focus on recruiting and retaining you know, a diverse STEM teaching workforce in order to benefit students of color, as well as all students that are, you know, part of our classrooms today, frankly. The way that we engaged in this work, next slide, was that we recognized that the Smithsonian Science Education Center couldn't do this work alone. We initially convened you know, a cross-section of stakeholders and an original meeting to really start to think about where we could have a collective impact across industry, universities, nonprofits, educators. And one of the things that we identified was that, you know, this need for a sort of a leadership summit, if you will. So we sort of, from that initial meeting, developed what we called a steering committee to help really identify models and develop out this programming sort of as a foundation. And we were able to benefit from the Teach to Lead model, if any of you have engaged in that work from which was originally from the US Department of Ed. And so we were able to sort of take that model and really heavily modify it for our own purposes, which is what it was designed to do. And we, you know, sort of launched our first summit at Howard University. Over the years, we have continued to implement summits, refine our programming, and we do this now in collaboration with an advisory committee, individuals who are represented here on the slide. And again, recognizing that, you know, this work takes a village, and we need to make sure that we're having sort of diverse voices at the table that represent, you know, diverse organizations to be able to be successful in this work. Next slide. So the summit itself has three main objectives. One, to create a logic model for attracting or retaining a diverse STEM teaching workforce. We recognize that these two things are very interrelated, attracting and retaining. But we really are asking teams who participate to focus on one or the other, because it's, you know, we sort of got an elephant, and you need to focus in on where you can take bites out of the elephant. Secondly, we want to empower teacher leaders to be change agents in their schools or districts, recognizing that we need to have teacher voice to be part of this work, or the work will not ultimately be successful. And then finally, to foster a community of professionals committed to improving education for all students. Likely you wouldn't be at this information session if you weren't already part of that category. So welcome. Next slide. Our sort of what we thought was an audacious goal, which we also need to take a second look at because perhaps it was not audacious enough, was to attract and retain 30,000 teachers by 2030. By attracting candidates to diversify STEM teaching, increasing the retention of STEM teachers from underrepresented population, and expanding leadership opportunities for STEM teachers for diverse populations. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that we've had some luck in doing this. So as I mentioned, we launched our first summit in 2017. The first two were held at Howard University. The second two were held at Xavier University. And then the third two were held virtually. So we're really excited to go back to in-person this year. I don't want to steal Sherelle's thunder, so I will leave it to her to let you know where we're going to be convening. But thus far, we've had 104 teams representing 27 states, including DC and Puerto Rico, from 66 unique districts that represent over 300,000 STEM teachers and 19.5 million students. We're really pleased with this impact thus far, but also recognize there's a whole lot more work to be done, which is where you all come in. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Sherelle.
Thank you so much. We can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to be talking about the summit activities so you can have a better sense of what to expect before, during, and after the summit. All right, so we can go to the next slide. As Amy mentioned, we have been able to go back to in-person. We're really excited about being able to do that. There is just so much value in being able to host these summits in person. And so this year we'll be at Dillard University, still in New Orleans, Louisiana, but at a different HBCU. And the summit will be hosted between Friday, March 3rd through Sunday, March 5th. Next slide, please. All right, so in terms of pre-summit activities, we have notified everyone that we will be sharing information about whether or not you've been selected for the summit as a team or a mentor on February 3rd. And immediately following that, if you haven't already been introduced in the initial email letting you know that you've been accepted, then we will make sure to introduce you to your team and mentor starting February 6th. We have lots of different things that we are working through between February 6th through the 22nd. So in addition to introducing you to either your team or your mentor, we are asking everyone to complete a traveler form so that we can assist you in coordinating travel arrangements. It is very important that we get this information as soon as possible, and you'll hear more about that later on in the session. But we'll also be hosting 3 mandatory webinars. They are crucial that you attend. Every team member, all mentors attend these webinars so that you can, one, have a chance to kind of learn more about the additional details of the program at the summit orientation, and then talk about topics related to understanding your organization's DEI strengths and growth areas, and just think more about program management. So all of the conversations that we're having at those webinars will truly assist you in preparing for the summit. And so we really want to make sure that you can attend. They will be recorded if things happen, because life does happen, but we really encourage you to make a true effort to attend them if you can. And we will provide all the information around when they are, what time, early on. We have the date set, but we will provide you with timing, when we have made a final decision on when they will actually take place, or what time they'll take place. In addition to that, mentors will be expected to attend training. So we don't have those dates identified yet, but we will. And when we do, we'll make sure to communicate that out to you as well. Next slide. So in terms of the summit itself, as I mentioned before, it's going to be hosted between March 3rd through 5th. The focus of the conversations that we're having at the summit are really framed around 3 questions. First, what does it take to manage systems level change? What is the root cause of the challenge you're observing, and what do you want to do about it? And then how can you attract support for your idea, right? So we're kind of breaking up these conversations across the 2.5-day experience. The first, as I mentioned, is focused on systems level change, so really understanding it and contextualizing it for your own work that you're hoping to do through your logic model. The second day is really focused on developing your logic model, and we'll start with conversations around identifying the root cause of your problem that you're seeing in regards to recruiting or retaining a diverse STEM teacher workforce. And then, as I mentioned, working on the development of your actual logic model to address that challenge that you've identified for yourself. And then finally, the last day will be centered around getting feedback and preparing you to gather buy-in from individuals within your education system, because we imagine that the work you want to do will take more individuals to see it through. Next slide. And so after the summit, really, we want you to focus on implementation. So for 18 months following the summit, we're asking you to really put your logic model or execute your logic model, and then learn from your implementation and share those lessons with us. And you'll be sharing those lessons through quarterly reports. We're asking you to share your successes and challenges, any resources and supports that you need on a quarterly basis so that we can learn from what you're doing, grow this program, and continue to refine it to meet the needs of the individuals who are participating in the summit, but also so that we can understand what resources really work well in supporting you in your implementation. All right, and the next slide. So now I'm just going to briefly go through team and mentor expectations. And I'll start with the quick questions. We can go to the next slide. I've got 2 questions for you, just to sit and think about. You don't necessarily need to drop a response into the chat, but really think about these 2 questions as a way to kind of frame your thinking around the reasons for why you want to apply, right? So first, how likely is it that a student will learn from a STEM teacher that looks like them or shares similar background experiences in your current education system? Or do you know of any active policies or practices your organization is using to attract and retain teaching candidates with diverse backgrounds? So these are important questions to think about. Again, to just frame your thinking and consider what all is needed in your organization right now to address this challenge around a lack of representation. Next question, or excuse me, next slide. So in terms of team expectations, after kind of considering the questions that I just shared with you, determine what you want to focus on. We're asking every team to understand either that they're going to be focused on attraction or retention in the application. And we're going to ask you to identify that when you apply. We also want you to consider your organizational culture, any DEA and I initiatives that have been put in place, any resources that are available to you. These are things that we'll continue to talk through, but we want you to at least start thinking about them well before you've, if you're selected, well before you attend the summit. Do you have a clear sense of the organizational behaviors and conditions that result in these observed outcomes? So anything that you're seeing that you want to change, what are the things that are kind of creating that? Again, we will continue to have conversations around this and identify these elements that contribute to these undesired conditions, but we do want you to have thought about it well before you've, or as you're working through your application. Next slide. We're asking all team members to also be part of this collective pool of knowledge and understanding, right? We want everyone to contribute to that. It's really important for us to capture all perspectives. And so we expect that all team members will be able to, have their perspectives and voices heard and valued. And that feeds into the development of the logic model as well. So it's not just a conversation about, what challenges exist and how different individuals or different stakeholders in your education system are affected by them, but also making sure that those individuals then have a role in contributing to the development of the logic model, and the things that you plan to implement actually will affect change for everyone that is involved in and benefits from what it is that you plan to do. In terms of the implementation, again, we also want to make sure that all team members are not just heard, not just contributing to the development of the logic model, but also participating in the implementation of it. So there should be clear steps for how every individual on your team member will be able to be involved in the implementation over that 18-month period. Next slide. So in terms of mentors, we are asking you to be a support, right? We want you to assist your team in leading them to be prepared for the summit and also during the summit. We want to make sure that you are there as a sounding board, a voice of reason, helping them to think through their challenges and clarifying their idea and the plans that they intend to work through and implement during implementation. And so we're asking you to be that voice of reason, push your team to think deeper and just be that support and lend your expertise, but also support them beyond the summit. So when it's time for them to actually actively execute their plan, we want you to be there to continue to push their thinking, help them navigate challenges that may arise all throughout the implementation period. Next slide. And so we also want to learn from you, right? We want this opportunity for you to develop a logic model and implement it, to also be an opportunity for us to figure out how to continue to best serve educators in the education system in regards to this specific challenge of a lack of representation in STEM classrooms. And so we're asking you to help us understand the perceptions of diversity that currently exist, think about ways that we can continue to support you in your progress and what it takes to be successful in implementation of a logic model, right? So what are the supports and things that are needed to make sure that teams can reach their goals? And we'll do this through a series of evaluation instruments, which include pre and post attitude surveys, program evaluations, and quarterly reports. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Next slide. So I'm just going to go through a quick overview of the different applications for teams and mentors. I'm going to actually share my screen if we go to the next slide. On our website, you can actually apply right now. It is available and live on our website. The applications are due Friday, January 23rd. You also can preview the applications for teams and mentors. And so, as I mentioned, I'm going to share my screen and just quickly go through what it looks like on our website. So as you can see here, there's a button here to apply if you are a team. And then if you scroll down here to the team application process, there is a link to allow you to review the application questions and team expectations. And there's some information about the early applicant raffle competition, which I'm going to discuss in a moment. But you also have the ability to review mentor application by clicking this little link here under mentor application process section in the on the website. So as I mentioned before, all of the applications are due January 20th, 2023. So make sure that you get your application in, and we can go ahead and pull up the presentation again of the team members, right? So we're looking to have 3 to 5 members on your team. One practicing classroom teacher, and then a variety of individuals who bring a diverse amount of perspectives to the team. So a school level administrator or district level administrator, school staff, a community member, a parent, or a local school or government official. Again, we're looking for that diversity on your team to ensure that multiple voices, multiple stakeholders are heard from within your education system. Next slide. Now, each one of these members is going to serve a specific role. So we have change agents who could be a district level administrator or anyone who has influence over the hiring and retention efforts and policies that are in place. This could also be a human resources specialist or someone who is considered a science education leader. But again, someone who has some influence would ideally serve in this role, but you will notice that many of the roles actually overlap, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But we want to have someone who's serving in that role, as well as an individual who has access to data, someone who is considered building level leadership, so a principal or assistant principal, someone who has content knowledge, so a classroom teacher, as we mentioned before. That is someone that we want to make sure is represented on your team, so we'll definitely be looking for that. Excuse me. And then a project manager. So this could be someone who is just invested in the work and really excited about furthering the idea that you have put in place. And so we want to make sure that we have someone who's managing that project and serves in that role as well. So next slide. On the next slide, you'll see an example of a team profile. We have an elementary school principal, a district HR person. We have a classroom teacher, an assistant superintendent, and a parent. As I mentioned before, lots of the roles can overlap. So all of these individuals are serving as change agents in their respective roles. But we also notice that the elementary school principal is serving as a level leader, so they're giving that perspective, and they are a project manager managing certain aspects of the project. We have our district HR person who is serving as a change agent and also has access to data. We've got our classroom teacher providing us some additional some content knowledge. We have our assistant superintendent who is also providing some information around data and serving as a project manager. And then we also have our parent who is assisting as a project manager and of course, change agent. So again, there is overlap, but we want to make sure that every individual on the team has a very specific role that they are filling on your team. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, there are other things that we're looking for in your application, including your clarity, the clarity of your team's original idea, the potential impact your idea will have within your education system, how the target population will benefit from your idea, and your team's ability to clearly express your need for support, developing a logic model and/or evidence that your team has obtained support or at least has been thinking about it. So it has some ideas about how you will obtain stakeholder support. And so I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these in the next slide, starting with clarity of your idea. So we're asking you to describe your idea, right? Going back to what some of the informal questions or informal assessment questions that I asked you at the very beginning of the section. What is it that you are observing and what do you want to do about it? Are you going to focus on attracting or retaining? Those are the things that we're looking for you to clarify in your application. What problems have you observed? How do you propose to address them? Really just wanting to know if you've taken the time to truly think through your challenges. We're looking to see if you've taken any actions to kind of put your idea in motion. And it's okay if you have not, but we do want to clearly see that come through in your application, just a description of what's going on and how you want to address it. And also, you know, we want to know what you hope to gain from this experience. That will really help us to understand whether or not this is the right space for you and right time. You know, in your application review, we want to make sure that we're picking folks who really can communicate to us the benefits of them attending. Next slide. Range of impact. So just describing how the work that you want to do will have an impact on either individuals in the classroom, schools, districts, or at the state level if you're looking at state education agencies. You know, what is the impact of the work that you plan on doing? What's your vision for how it will improve educational outcomes for traditionally underserved students in your community in the short term and long term? On the next slide are a list of key performance indicators that we're asking you to think about and select at least one that you will be looking at or reviewing as a way to determine whether or not you're successful, right? So we're asking you to select those from the application. And on the next slide, you'll see just some additional things that we'll be looking out for. So do you, or have you thought about how your, you know, the target population, so teachers from traditionally underrepresented communities benefit from the proposed idea? And then what is the role of other educators and stakeholders in your education system to support this plan, right? And lead the work. And finally, we'll also be considering, if you go to the next slide, data, right? And we understand that data is limited to some folks. And so if you don't have it available to you, we completely understand, but please do share what you do have and what is available to you. And it's just helpful for us to understand the types of, or the conditions, if you will, of the teams that we are working with and supporting. And so that information is important to us to know. And then if you're a returning team, I recognize some names on the call this morning. And if you are a returning team, we welcome you to apply, but we also will be taking into consideration any previous performance that you've had at the summit in previous years, and of course, post-summit implementation. So anything that you've been doing following the summit, we'll be taking that into consideration as part of your full application. Next slide. In terms of mentor selection, we are looking to identify 20 mentors, and we are evaluating mentor applications based on your current involvement in STEM education and promoting equity in education, as well as your background experience and professional experience, right? We're looking at it holistically, or as best we can, to try to understand what you've been able to do, what expertise you bring to the table. And on the next slide, we will be considering how your expertise really meets the needs of the team that of a team that you've been paired with, right? So we'll be considering all of those things, as well as your context, right? So do you have experience working in a similar organizational type that we want of a team that we've selected, or geographic location is also something that we consider, right? Are you familiar with the area? And then of course, if you are someone who has served as a previous mentor at a summit in the past, that's important to us. It doesn't guarantee that you'll be selected, but it is important to us, and we do consider it a strength on your application. So please do indicate that if that's true for you. All right, and so now I'm going to hand it over to Alex to talk about travel and accommodation.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about travel and accommodations and what is covered by the Smithsonian Science Education Center. Advanced slide. Amazing. So what is covered by Smithsonian? We will be covering a 2-night hotel stay between March 3rd and 5th. The program is set to begin in the afternoon of March 5th. So the hotel coverage would be for the night of March 3rd and the night of March 4th, as the program will wrap up in the afternoon on March 5th. We will also be providing ground transportation between the hotel, your accommodations, and all event venues. You will be responsible for travel between the airport, or if you take the train, by whatever means you get there, to the hotel upon arrival and upon departure. But during the duration of the program, we take care of all transportation otherwise. So who is eligible for travel and hotel? SSEC will provide travel and lodging for anybody who lives outside of a 50-mile radius of the event venue. That is a federal rule about providing travel accommodations, so that is not something that is negotiable. But those who are outside of the 50-mile radius, SSEC will book and manage and pay for travel. And commuters within 50 miles of the event will not be reimbursed for gas, but drivers outside of that 50-mile radius, that is also an option and can be reimbursed for mileage at the federal rate. Hop slide forward. Amazing. So SSEC will also be providing some meals for the duration of the program. They will be provided during the program itself. So on that first day, with the program beginning in the afternoon, we will be providing dinner on Friday the 3rd, breakfast and lunch on the 4th, and breakfast and lunch on the 5th, as those will be during the program itself. Some important dates when it comes to travel. So upon receiving notice if you have been accepted to the program or not, we will ask you to fill out travel information that is imperative to be able to book travel for you, and that includes legal name, gender that is included on legal documentation, and date of birth. And we will also be asking for, if you are flying, desired departure airport, which is not something we can guarantee if there's another airport in your area, but we'll try our best to accommodate. And we would need to get all that information back from you the following week after you would know if you would be accepted. A couple weeks after that, participants would begin to receive travel itineraries from us, and you'll receive final itineraries, ticketed itineraries the following week prior to travel. And we'll hand this back over to Sherelle.
Thank you. And just a quick note about health and safety regulations. We just want to make sure that you're aware of what our plans are to ensure your health and safety. And so currently at our planned venue, Dillard University, masks are encouraged but not required. However, we will actively monitor and follow any updates around, masking or other things, other conditions that are put out through the university, guidelines and procedures, New Orleans city government directives, and of course, Smithsonian recommendations and directives for staff and off-site programming. So if things change in terms of the masking situation, we will definitely let you know and provide updates as appropriate. So at this time, we are going to open up for questions if there are any. Yes, private charter schools are eligible to attend. I see that question coming up in the chat. Feel free to also come off mute if you just want to have a conversation. We will take the slides down and just and respond to the questions as they come in. And let me just clarify, going back to this question in the chat that's currently there, are private charter schools eligible to attend? I'm assuming you're planning on having them still apply, yes? Not as an observer, but more just, is that correct, Patsy? Yeah, okay, perfect, absolutely. Anu, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in applying to be a mentor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And a lot of my experience is from being an administrator in higher education. I have recently taken a job in South Carolina helping teachers at pre-K to 12th grade. And I'm just wondering if I should even consider applying for a mentor. I mean, do you have to have been a year's experience as an administrator or as a teacher in pre-K through 12 or?
We consider university folks, our university faculty as well. It's actually pre-K through 16. So if you have experience in that space, we welcome you
I'm
to
sorry.
apply as mentor. No, great question. I'm glad that
I thought I saw 12. So I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you asked, just to reconfirm. But yes, please do apply.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sherelle?
So we are looking at sometime in the afternoon. I see the question in the chat, but
Okay.
just want to make
Yep.
sure I'm not interrupting anyone. Oh,
Nope.
okay. So yeah, what time on the what time on the 3rd will the summit start? So we're looking at in the afternoon, sometime between 1 and 2 o'clock. We'll have more official time to share within, a few weeks. We have some things to discuss internally before we put that information out. But you will, of course, know if you are selected by the time that you are selected. But it'll happen later in the day. Juliana?
Hi, good morning. Okay, thank you for this webinar. It's really informative. I'm with the CDC. Would we be eligible to apply to be mentors?
Yes, assuming, and I'm not sure if you have programs that, support teachers or you've done work like that, teacher prep, things like that. And if that's the case, then absolutely. We will take, the experience that you share in your application into account. So if you are ideally working with teachers in some capacity, that will be important for us to know, and that we'll take that into consideration.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like a good fit. We do have a teacher training program. So the second question I have is, I know that for 18 months, there's the expectation for us to continue working with our team. Aside from that, or in addition to the summit itself, how much time, like historically, has been, what's the time expectations typically for mentors?
So I will say, I'm going to preface this by saying it really depends on your team, what your team needs. Some teams and mentors, they have check-ins that happen monthly. And I just want to make sure I'm answering your question in terms of how much commitment mentors have in terms of supporting their team throughout the 18-month process, right? The 18-month
Yes,
implementation process.
exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. So, some teams check in with their mentors once a month, others, quarterly, kind of in accordance with like how often the reporting needs to happen. It really will vary on what your team needs at the time. So there is no hard set rule, but we do, the reporting will ideally let us know how often you're checking in with your team and supporting them. And so, again, it'll vary, but.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Daniel?
Hi, thank you for doing this. We had a team from our region who participated last year in a summit, and the school district of Philadelphia is looking at putting together another team to work on a different problem, different idea. How much collaboration should there be between a prior team in the region? What's recommended?
So, I mean, I would say at least, have someone from that region kind of talk you through what they're planning on doing. And if there's a way that you all can work together to further the plan that you propose, that would be great, right? Because that might add to your impact. But I'm not sure how to truly answer that question because it really will depend on what it is that you're wanting to do. But hopefully you'll have opportunities to overlap and work together to further both of your plans. But at the very least, I think it would be beneficial to talk to someone from that team who's participated in the past and learn more about what they're doing if you haven't already.
Yeah, we already are. I just definitely we are talking, and I've been working with them. But I just want to know, is there going to be any assumption that we should already be working with that team on a different idea instead of proposing a new one? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's not an expectation at all.
Okay.
If it's a new idea, something completely different, then we'll look at it as that, and we won't take into account something else that's happened from a team in the past.
Thank you.
Hi, good
welcome.
morning. This is Dr. Joy. How you doing? I'm from
morning.
the Philadelphia, and we've been participating in the program, and we're developing our next cohort of our partners, the University of Penn. And I put my email address in the chat. And Daniel, I would like to follow up with you.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. Okay. Thank you. I mean, and just really quick, Daniel, some of that natural collaboration does happen. We encourage it, but again, we can't tell you how to direct your plan, right? I see this question from Jana. If you had a team at a different summit, should we indicate that as yes? Why not? No. So that is a completely different initiative and focus. So you would not indicate yes if you've had a team attend Zero Barriers. Thank you for that question.
I don't recognize his name.
All right. Any other questions? We got a few more moments. And if not, that's okay. Let me just drop my email in here one more time. Because if questions do arise, I want to make sure that you you reach out to me, because I know some things do come up as you're filling out the application that you may not be thinking about right now. So, but we'll stay back for a few more moments for anyone who has questions, and if not, we thank you for attending this information session, and we look forward to seeing some applications come through soon.